Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now, here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders on the path they took to create change. Past guests include Ryan Dice, Joe Polish, and Jason Fladlin. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 29 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to Goldstein Patent Law, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you can schedule a call with my team at speaktolarry.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today my friend Christene Marie. Christene is the founder and CEO of The Knowing Agency. She works with executives and organizations to position their corporate and personal brands with authenticity, so that they can establish an emotional connection with their target audience throughout their customer journey. Christene has worked with brands such as Amazon, Toyota, the NAACP, and the Kellogg Foundation. She's an international speaker, has a new book coming out this spring, and I'm really happy to welcome my friend Christene Marie. Welcome, Christene.
Thank you, Rich. I'm so glad we're doing this. I feel like it's been a long time coming.
Absolutely, it has. Absolutely. So, let's roll it back and talk about kind of how you got started in the business branding space. Tell me about entrepreneurial journey and how you got to here.
Yeah. So when I was 12 years old, I started a little girls camp. I was obviously a young girl at the time, but I started a camp for girls 4 and 5. Ran that for 7 years, and I guess 12 is when I actually became an entrepreneur. But I didn't have anyone in my life who modeled the path of the entrepreneur for me. So that was something I just did at home, and essentially, it was pretty successful. I was financially independent from my parents at age 12, But at the time, I just didn't have a category for what I was doing or what I was running a business, and I had no idea. I didn't understand that the emails I was sending and building up the brand of that camp, the flyers I would create, all of that was essentially positioning me for, the path that I ended up taking, which is branding and marketing. And so when I was 18 years old, I told my friend, I was like, I just want to make an impact in the world. And they were like, well, you got to have a skill set. So I essentially started exploring branding and marketing as a consequence. And I had a very non-traditional journey to get to where I am today. I didn't go to college. I literally learned by doing. I got a digital marketing certification. And especially in the digital marketing space, it's changing so rapidly. So I would listen to podcasts, the OGs, Amy Porterfield, a whole bunch of people who were at the cutting edge of the transition through social media, those who were really experiencing it right at the cusp of digital advertising. And I learned from them kind of right out of the gate back in 2011, all the way up until today. I just listened a lot, and then I implemented, and then I tested as I went. And so I think that there's something really beautiful about that journey of just learning by doing, that it's a little bit gritty and you learn in the trenches. And then as you begin to look further ahead and establish more of a vision of, okay, well, I want to take ownership of my life, which was essentially what happened when I was 26 years old. I listened to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that was my first kind of wake up to, well, do I want to keep giving all my money away to the government? And do I want to keep having these employers running my schedule and running my life? Or do I actually want to take control of it? And so I decided to start a business at 26 years old. And my biggest fear was that I would not learn anymore. And learning had been my greatest asset, my ability to self-educate and self-teach. And so essentially, because that had been my model and path forward to date, I was committed to continuing to do that so that I would never be the smartest person in the room. And Rich, I'm never the smartest person in the room, which I'm very grateful for. But I ended up starting my business in 2019, and it's been a kind of a roller coaster ride. I'm sure many entrepreneurs say that. But when it comes to the entrepreneurial journey, we're never just focusing on the professional. As an entrepreneur, you are so holistic in terms of you're a parent, you're a brother, you're a spouse, you're all these other things. An entrepreneur is just one other hat that you wear. And so if anything is disruptive in your personal life, you're going to feel it in your professional life, because it just bleeds so much over into each other. And so I started the business in 2019, but right around that time, I started going through some really, really hard times on the personal end. And so while the business was growing and I was experiencing a lot of success there, my personal life was kind of falling apart. I got married when I was 20, which is very young, and I don't recommend that. But I loved my husband so, so, so much. And our marriage dissolved, and it just completely broke my heart. And it ended in 2021, so 2 years after I had the business. And it was almost like I woke up for the first time on a personal side. So I kind of woke up on the professional side when I listened to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then I woke up on the personal side when my husband left. And so now I'm fully awake, and now I'm looking at this world around me and really asking the question, well, how did I get here? Who was I that lended to me getting to this point? And then who do I want to be? And so effectively asking that question of who do I want to be professionally and personally has completely changed the trajectory of my life, where now I truly am in the driver's seat of my life. And I have this vision for where now we're taking the company. We've gone through a rebrand to the Knowing Agency, and it's all based and predicated on this concept of knowing, because I have found that the more we know our customers on a heart level, and the more we empower them to know their customers on a heart level, the more we're able to do really strategic, smart marketing to make sure that the conversations take place and form those emotional connections that drive purchase decisions. Harvard Business Study found that 95% of decisions are made in the subconscious, which is where our emotions live. So that's really the tactics that we take. But that's kind of the entrepreneurial journey has been. It's not disparate of self. It's very much connected with the personal. So the healthier we are as in our personal life, the more our businesses thrive. And I found that to be very true.
Nice. Well, yeah, something interesting that I'm just in there in what you just said. But something I find interesting is it sounds like you're kind of living your life as a marketer, which in other words, like you talked about how you listen to everything, and then implemented, which sets you apart from about 80% of the room. So the remaining 20%, and of those, probably 80% don't do the other thing you did, which was to measure and test and iterate. So like that puts you in the first of all, that puts you in the top percentage right there, and that's your marketer. But it sounds like that's also how you're describing your life, where you are. You've been kind of listening to what your life has been doing and what it's been telling you, and you are out there doing it, and then you are kind of testing and deciding what's going to be next, right? So you're kind of marketing your life.
Love that.
Yeah.
Rich, that is one of the most profound sentiments anyone has said to me after hearing a little bit of my story. That was so profound. Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I think that if all of us could learn to do what you just said, we'd all be better for it. My goodness, I love that. That was so rich. Thank you.
So me, yes.
Yeah. Right when I said it, I was like, oh, I just did a pun.
It is. I do like to do that, and I think that just comes from listening for context, and anything is how we do everything, and like those patterns are just we are in our personal life, they're in our professional life, they're just how we decide to tackle the world. So, and I think it's.
And to your point about listening, I mean, I'd like to hear how you've learned to cultivate that skill, because I actually think it's incredibly hard to learn to listen.
Well, if you really want to know, I mean, I think it comes from the time that I was involved in running a transformational workshop organization and training. I was never formally trained as a course lead. I was the CEO. I was running the organization, but I did pick up a bunch of things, and one of them is a principle called pace lead, where it's the tendency is to listen and then to want to speak, right? To listen and then want to give your advice and your suggestion. But
Mm.
the idea is to ask a question and listen. And then you think, like, okay, I know what they need, but you don't say anything and you ask another question. And
Mm.
you really know, but you don't say anything. You ask another question. And then once you do have something to say, it will be deeper in their world because you've asked questions, you've been curious,
Yes.
and that listening has had an impact on the way that they receive what you're about to say next.
Yes.
It's an NLP concept originally. It's called pace lead or pace lead.
I really, really love that. And it really endears them to you because they do feel heard and seen, which I think that is an art in and of itself, is to make someone feel valued, and the listening is such a proponent to that. So I love that. I'm gonna keep that in mind. And I like the 3 paces. I
Yeah.
think that's good.
And here's the thing, you can coach someone by just asking them questions without ever even without ever even interjecting any so-called wisdom, right? Just by asking questions, you could bring them through a journey of discovering something about themselves. So like one of the exercises that those course leaders did back then was to have an entire conversation where they were only allowed to ask questions. They couldn't make a comment. It was just question and the next question, and next question, and next question.
I love that. I really, really, really love that, especially because as a leader, the ability to have those emotional connections with your team where they do feel seen by you and believed in, the asking of questions it shows them that you care by giving them time and giving your interest in their personal life. And then also they feel like they come up with the answer themselves and then they're going to be that much more probably propelled to do the work that is required.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like they feel empowered to
Yes.
do something with it, with their own discovery, as opposed to what someone is telling them, this is what you should do.
I love that. That's so good.
But yeah, I think on that topic though of leadership and emotions, like let's talk about emotional intelligence. So
Hmm.
a topic that you care deeply about as it pertains to business.
Yeah, I really, really do, Rich, because I've seen the impact of it not being present in organizations. So the definition of emotional intelligence, it's kind of a both and. So the first part of the definition is the ability to understand, express, and convey one's own personal feelings. And then also the ability to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and with empathy. So ultimately with wisdom and with empathy. And so this concept of emotional intelligence is ultimately what we've really found to be the case with helping our brands to know themselves and then also know their customers. So knowing themselves to be able to understand their heart values and the why behind it, rather than just kind of those answers that you kind of spout out. Well, yeah, we care about integrity, we value honesty. It's like, okay, well, everyone does. Why? And when you tug on the strings of the why of each one of the values that companies hold, usually there's a really personal story about how those and why those values came into being. And then being able to tell those on a personal level, that forms emotional connections because everyone's been a kid. You can't deny that. So if this value was formed in childhood because of something that happened with your father or your grandfather and any other experiences, it's that much more emotional that will connect not only with your client, but also with your employees. And talk about building employee retention. It's when they feel emotionally connected to the brand and to the mission. And our consumers likewise want to feel like they are buying into something bigger than just a pair of socks that they're buying from you. I mean, Tom's shoes blew up because people knew that for every shoe that they bought, one was being donated. So there's a lot of opportunity when you do incorporate the emotional aspect, but it's not just being intelligent about oneself and one's brand. It's also being intelligent about your consumers so that you can meet them with empathy in an emotionally intelligent way. And the empathy piece is empathy is ultimately being able to sit in someone else's experience with them. So you have to have the emotional intelligence to unpack the emotional experience that your customer is feeling before your product or service are offering, And then selling the emotional transformation. You're currently here emotionally, we're going to get you to this other side on an emotional level, and then being able to put that forward. So the emotional intelligence piece, both on the brand and the customer side, is incredibly important to me, but obviously it translates on the personal level for us as individuals and executives as well. So I care a lot about that.
Of branding. So then how do you incorporate that emotional connection or that empathy into a brand that you're creating, or or a campaign that you're creating?
Right. Well, when we first onboard clients, we'll go through a brand audit and marketing strategy analysis and just understand what have you been doing, what's working, what's not, but then also really understanding who their customer audience is. Who's your target market? Who are you currently serving? And then we'll do, obviously, everybody knows this, they do surveys, right? Most recently, we did a survey to about 5,000 emails, and we got 550 plus respondents. So we were really pleased with that, and that gave us really good insight. But what we also like to do is we form the questions in a certain way so that we can understand their emotional motivators. Have you ever heard of the Enneagram?
Yep.
So we use the Enneagram and categorize the audience to fit within whichever Enneagram profile they have, and then we'll create the marketing strategies for these individuals. And I was just at AI Bot Summit last week, Carrie Belter's AI Bot Summit. It was amazing. And one of the prompts that was recommended to all of us to put into ChatGPT, it was so robust. It was quite long, but it was incredibly robust. And so we incorporate the Enneagram into that prompt that they gave us so that we can get at the emotional level. And then we create campaigns, and then we create strategies surrounding the emotional messaging and angle based on their Enneagram. Because being able to meet them again at the emotional level is what's going to motivate them to not only do business with you, but then also be tied in loyalty to you and become your evangelist, which is ultimately your greatest marketer.
Got it. And so I guess for those that are not familiar with the Enneagram, I mean, you could equate it to other personality tests that kind of classify people according to characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you develop a profile based on the Enneagram that then gives you some insight into kind of what they care about, what they respond to, and
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, so the Enneagram has 9 different numbers associated with it. It can be akin to Myers-Briggs. And so essentially each one of the 9 numbers has a core fear. They have ultimately a desire, and those motivate them, and that's how they make decisions. And this is incredibly useful for sales as well. This personality profile isn't just for marketing; it's also for selling. And essentially, I'm working on a copywriting course right now with Ryan Dyson, digital marketer, and we're talking about that very specifically. Salesmen are so well paid in the industry, but who's writing the messaging? Well, that's marketing. Who's writing the sales pitch for them? Well, that's the marketing team. And so the more sales and marketing can be talking to each other about the types of questions customers are posing, what are the biggest roadblocks that salesmen are running into, then the more marketers can actually adjust their tactics to be aligned with sales so that the brand is consistent in its representation and in its aesthetics, all of it. We want brand consistency at every single touch point.
Got it. So, I mean, shifting a little bit, let's talk about so you recently did a rebranding of your agency to Know, and I mean, tell me a little bit about what led to that and what that really means to you.
Yeah. So in 2021, my husband ended up leaving, and so my former business was tied to my last name, and ultimately, when he left, I knew that I needed to do a rebrand, but I didn't want to casually rebrand it. I really wanted to have a deep, rich meaning to it. And so over the last few years, I've really dove deep into this concept of emotional health and emotional intelligence on a personal level. Obviously, I've already shared how that translates professionally, but on a personal level, I essentially looked in the mirror for the first time when my husband left. I knew that I was coming to face with the decision of, will I look and translate my grief and my sorrow to blame or looking externally about why the relationship ended? Or am I going to take up the personal responsibility to look in the mirror and identify every single possible way that I can grow as a result of this, regardless of the percentage of fault or blame or whatever? So I looked inward, and I looked in the mirror for the first time in my life, and saw someone who had been existing as a non-person, because I'd been so horizontally aligned. I had been so looking to everyone else around me to indicate who I should be and what the expectations were of me. And I really wanted to make people happy. That was a chief goal of mine. I wanted to connect with people, but I effectively learned that until I really truly know myself and can come from a deep place of knowing, then the connections that are birthed from that place of true authenticity, that's when the most meaningful connections occur. And I got to tell you, I have made some of the most meaningful relationships and connections I have ever made in my entire life in the last 2 years because of the work that I've done to know self. But it's been very painful, and it's been very hard to look in the mirror, because you have to face the darkness and the light. You have to be willing to face the discomfort of change in order to get to the, not even just the other side, because it's a journey of knowing, but effectively, knowing has so impacted me personally, but then also professionally. And so that's really why we did our rebrand to the Knowing Agency, is because of our knowing process, which is our cadence of positioning brands authentically and then being able to position them to meet their audience with empathy.
Nice. It's very interesting. And what occurs to me too in that is the character diamond.
Mm-hmm.
The whole notion of like all the characters that we know in popular culture and even out there kind of fit this kind of diamond of different it's like kind of 4 different poles of different characteristics, and part of it is the flawed nature of a character, right? Like that's part of it is FLAW, if my New York accent just makes it.
I did get it. It's true. No, it's so true. And actually, I was on Digital Marketer podcast a couple months ago, and Mark mentioned the character diamond, and he walked through what character diamond digital marketer is, and was sharing about that concept. And I really love that. I hadn't used the character diamond, that verbiage, but I love it. And I think it's really robust, and I think it really accurately captures what you were just mentioning.
Right. And the spirit, though, beneath that and in any other method that you use to get there is just authenticity. What you were saying in terms of like having the full exploration of what the character is or what the brand is, including the side, not just the light, is just it's important to be real.
Yes. And Rich, I have to tell you, I mean, I had to come with face to face with the decision. If I'm going to be authentic, people are not going to like me, because that's what strong brands do. They have lovers and haters, and if you look at any of the studies that have been done, the blind taste test studies for like Coca-Cola versus Dr. Pepper or something, people who love Coca-Cola, they'll actually choose Dr. Pepper or Pepsi. I think that it was Pepsi. They did the blind test taste between Coca-Cola and Pepsi. They chose Pepsi in the blind taste test. But then when they found out that they chose Pepsi, they were like, actually, I liked the other one better, because they're so emotionally compelled and driven to this product that they just love. And that's ultimately what a strong brand does, is that it really does kind of shift through those people who are going to be loyal to them through the end. I mean, Apple product users, they will camp out overnight for the next iPhone release because it's an experience. They've bought into the experience that this strong brand presents because they're willing to be brave and walk in who they are. And that translates to us because each one of us has a proprietary brand, because no one else has our souls.
Yep. Absolutely. And now just shifting gears a bit again, you were in a movie recently.
Yes.
Let's talk about how that came about and kind of how that even ultimately ties into what you do with branding.
Yeah. So that was something that was incredibly serendipitous and frankly a childhood dream of mine. I met someone in DC back last February, and I just mentioned that I've always wanted to be in like a Christmas Hallmark type movie. And 9 months later, he calls me. He's like, "Hey, are you still in the area? I need a wife." I was like, is this a joke? Because he didn't have me audition, nothing. I'd been kind of like a closet actor. I loved acting in commercials. I loved being on stage in high school, but I was never very public about it, and I had never done film. And so I was like, there's no way this is real. He's not even having me audition. But it came closer to the production dates, and then we finally did a roundtable Zoom reading, and I met all the other characters and cast members, and I shut off my laptop afterwards, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I kind of freaked out. I was so excited. And yeah, we did the movie. It was a Christmas holiday movie. It was literally the fulfillment of my childhood dreams. And it was the most fun. It felt like we were in camp. We were all holed up in this hotel, and did the shoot at this beautiful historic mansion in Baltimore, Maryland. And yeah, it felt like summer camp. We'd all be on the same hall, and one of us, I'd be coming back from the gym in the morning and taking a business call, and everyone would pop their heads out and be like, good morning. Like it was such a wonderful, fun experience. And it was interesting because I was able to use the Enneagram in the character development of my character for the movie. Reading through the script, and they were wonderful in terms of the director and the production team. They gave us a lot of free rein to develop the emotional struggle of the character diamond of the individual that we were playing. And so I used the Enneagram and really moved through, okay, what are my fears? What are my frustrations? What are my values? Why am I saying what I'm saying? Why am I in this position? And it really lended to this full dimension of character where effectively, they loved who my character was in the film. And I really attribute it to the work that we've done in branding and in marketing, because the more you can take time to understand someone, the more you can add color and flavor to not only how you market to them, but then also the representation thereof.
Got it. And also that led toward you speaking at Sundance, correct?
Yes. Yeah. And then the next month after we did the recording, I hopped on a plane to Park City, and it was talk about Christmas in person, Christmas magical town. There was snow 4 feet up to my waist, and it was just the most magical, beautiful city. I'd never been to Sundance Film Festival, but I spoke on a panel there, and it was amazing. And I got to share about that experience with a few other cast members about how do you actually go through the process of developing a really robust character.
Got it. And speaking of developing characters and branding, so you've got a course coming out in a few months that hasn't been announced quite yet, but that and in the process of putting together a book that's going to come out this spring.
Mm-hmm.
So passion behind that you're really you're looking forward to expressing with the world.
Yeah, clearly we've got a lot in the works. I'll start with the book. So the book is ultimately my journey and my process of knowing self, catalyzed through brokenness. And it's really my process, my 3-step process, going through the questions asked, the interaction I had with my therapist throughout the time, who really was a good guardian throughout that time. And so it's kind of the process and the tools that I used and the questions I asked, and ultimately the emotional transformation I went through from at the outset looking in the mirror and not knowing who was staring back at me, to today when people ask you, who are you? I feel like I know, and I think we're always going through an evolution of knowing, and that will always change, which makes life exciting, because if we would ever arrive, that'd be kind of boring. So I love the journey, but I feel so much more aware and known than I've ever felt in my life. And it's such a beautiful and rewarding thing, because so long as we are tied to being known by others, I think we'll constantly be disappointed, because they're human beings just like we are. But if we learn to know ourselves and almost give the compassion and empathy we need for our own selves, it eliminates us relying so much on a horizontal lens, so that we actually can come forward and be our authentic selves, not contingent on the approval or expectations of others. So that's knowing. That's the book. And then as it pertains to the digital course, it's effectively walking executives and brands through the process of how to establish a proprietary brand, which is you, and walking them through that process. It's going to be very much a workshop time where it's going to be live, but then also recorded for future purposes. And so we walk through that, and planning to incorporate a few of my colleagues who's going to talk about speaking on stages and how to actually procure speaking gigs as well. So it's develop your personal brand and then how to get it out into the world, and then how to secure a presence on stages as well as the digital presence.
They both sound pretty much the same, right? It's like
definitely, yeah.
Right. And
yeah, the book is very personal, and the course is very professional, if you would.
Focus is
on the same
your brand, and knowing your brand, being consistent with your brand, bringing your brand out there into the world. Yeah. And anyway,
yeah, they are. You're absolutely right. They're very tied. So
awesome. So if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how do they go about doing so?
They can find me on Instagram, Christene Marie, ChristeneMarie, Christene Marie.
Awesome. Okay. And Christene, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview, to come on this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich. I really enjoy your friendship and who you are. So thank you for your time.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.